everybody, good morning. This is Jean here, Jean Truelove from Truelove Quilts for you. Hopefully you can hear me. It's a little bit windy. I'm just taking my morning walk and I'm in the back garden and I wanted to share with you something very big for us. As you know, Ian and I were not gardeners, but we inherited these planter beds here. And our daughter Malia and our friend Ying came and planted some tomato plants for us. And lo and behold, let me turn this camera around, plants are growing tomatoes. That's all we're growing. But what had happened was, amongst the weeds, because again, we're not gardeners, what had happened was I had about 10 or 12 potatoes that had sprouted. And so Ian pushed them in the ground here, and look at that. We have potatoes. That's about, oh, excuse me, that's about all we have. She has some herbs over here, the tomatoes. So, you people who say start growing your own food, we're starting very small. I just want to take you around here. I am going to be showing you some quilting. I'm working on my embroidered blocks quilt. It's almost done. It's almost done actually. I'm doing the ice cream cone border, which was not, it wasn't hard, but it was a very a task that had to be done, scallop by scallop by scallop. Oh, there's a water bottle on the ground. Let me just pick this up. Don't know what that's there for. So yeah, so I'm working on that. I'm just in my backyard here. Move the chairs. And I just wanted to show you what is happening with the cursed tree. Remember our tree? Let me turn this around. So here's our house. Oh, I don't know if you can see. We put in we put our all my paint by numbers up there. This is the side of our house. As you know, we live on a busy road, so hopefully you can hear. But here is the tree. It's still down. The leaves, the limbs are still down. It has been too hot to do this tree. We're just dying here. And for any, oops, hopefully you can hear. Anybody who is going to come and help us, the boys, they're like, just hold on. It's just too hot. Oh, it's windy. I don't want the tree to fall onto me again. This is the tree. There's where the one branch broke. This is the branch over the power lines that PECO for 17 days have said they're going to come out. It's not broken, so the power lines are still intact. But with the wind and the other branch up there, it's just really scary. It's a big old tree, and that's what it did. So we have to get the chainsaw out. What a mess. We haven't even cleaned up all the stuff off the porch. Anyway, that's that. Just thought you'd be interested in why we haven't tidied it up. There's our house. And oh, we actually put a table out here. That's my mom and dad's old maple table from, they would be married 80 plus years. And we put that table outside here on the porch. That was their wedding furniture. We have their hutch inside. I quite like the pictures out there. Ian really secured them. Anyway, that's that. It's a daunting task to take that tree down. But as I said, PECO has said, oh, don't touch it. We'll come. So we're just waiting. Let's go back in here. Anyway, I have been working on my quilt. I just wanted to share that with you. It gets to 100 degrees. It was literally almost 100 degrees. So I just wanted to say hello and thank you so much for all of your lovely thoughts. Ian is getting better slightly from this virus, I didn't have a good few days actually. I don't need antibiotics, but just very tired. But again, I think it's the weather. So I do hope you enjoy this video. A little bit sped up in places because it's repetitive, scallop after scallop after scallop. But how I'm working on my quilt. So again, folks, thank you so very much for following and all your kindness. And yeah, hope you enjoy the video. See ya. My bias binding, and I've cut this at 2 1/4 inches like I do all the time. Now I usually would press this in half, but I'm not going to do that. I'm also going to be showing you how I attach this a different way. I did start out by leaving about a 7-inch tail, and I've turned this in. I believe that's a 45-degree angle, and that one I did press like that. I was watching on YouTube a different way to attach a binding, and you sort of slot this end in when I finish it into here, but I'll get to that. So I've cut this at 2 1/4 inches. This is on the bias, and I've not pressed it. What I am doing is I am doing what I usually do. I'm sewing my binding to the back of my quilt, and I'm going to turn it over to the front of my quilt, and I'm going to machine stitch it. Now, I'm not hoping at all to make an award-winning quilt or get a ribbon, because I know that the quilt judges are very squirrely and very particular about quilt bindings especially. Now, this is my ice cream cone border, as you can see here, and I'm having a million little scallops, and I'm not going to be hand sewing that. I am going to be turning that over, and I'm going to be machine stitching it. However, I've really cheated. I want to show you what I've done. I wanted to see if I could do this and if it would work. So I did a little bit of my binding, just a corner of my binding, and I've stitched it onto the back, and I've turned it over, and I've actually gone and I've stitched this bit of the binding down. Now I never do this. I just wanted to see if that would be, to my eye, acceptable, that I have machined stitched this down, if I could make it nice enough. And I think actually I have done that. However, I'm going to be adding, and I was going to do this anyway, I always say a quilt needs a little tiny bit of white. Remember I always say that? Well, I found this baby rickrack, tiny little tiny baby rickrack, and you know how I love my rickrack. Now I'm going to very carefully stitch this baby rickrack onto the stitching, sort of to hide that machine stitching. Not that I'm ashamed of my machine stitching. Anybody can see that this is machine stitched on here. And I think I've done pretty well. The valleys, the hills and the valleys are pretty good. So that was an experiment. I never would do that, but this is like my finished quilt when I put on my little baby rickrack. As you can see, I've not ironed it at all. It's under my needle here. So what I'm doing is just one bit at a time. I'm folding that in half as I go along. And again, I'm making very, very sure that my 1/4 inch away from the curved top and down to the valley is perfect. My 1/4 inch. I'm just taking my time, and I'm leaving my needle down in the valley there, okay? I'm switching my quilt around, just making sure that these edges are together. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of pull this bit here sort of straight under my presser foot, and I'm going to come back up this peak, and I'm going to just relax this binding, keeping it together. Just relax it, bite at a time. I'm not pulling this bias binding at all. And I'm really making sure to keep my 1/4 inch. I'm going to come back down. I'm shifting my quilt the whole time, keeping the edges, the raw edges together. And again, needle down, presser foot up, shift my quilt, and then turn it like that. It looks like I'm pulling, but I'm not. I'm just placing my presser foot towards me, keeping my 1/4 inch, my edges together. And I think it's easier that I didn't press it, because this is on the bias. I'm letting the fabric go where it wants to go. I always say that. And I think in this respect, I don't want to be, you know, having anything set in stone, because it is such a not a complicated, but maybe a little bit of a challenging border. But as you can see, I'm just addressing each little curved top, just slowly making sure I'm keeping my 1/4 inch. I'm now turning my binding from the back to the front, stitching it down. Now, the piece that I had done before, I don't know if you can see this, I had really pressed this well. I take it over to my ironing board, and I really ironed that well. And because I hadn't ironed my binding, because I haven't ironed my binding in half, I found that when I was sewing it here on the machine, it was sort of lumpy and a little bit wobbly, but as soon as I went over to my ironing board and I ironed it down, I got that nice crisp edge. And of course, my binding, my quilt scallops are right to the edge of the binding. You always want to fill your binding. You don't want to overfill it so you have like a rolled lump, and you don't want a flappy binding. So considering this is not a task for beginners. Yeah, I'm quite pleased with the way I'm doing this, and as I said, it does need a good press. But what I'm doing is I'm just concentrating on one scallop at a time, one puff at a time, and I'm turning my attention to the valley here. Hopefully you can see this, and I'm going to be putting the valley piece in. That's where I am now, and I'm going to be pulling out this curved piece because it's on the bias, and my needle is down in the valley. I'm just positioning my presser foot to where I want to go, and I know my hands are in the way, but this is fiddly, so you'll have to believe me. I'm rolling this over, and I'm pulling out the top of my curved piece, just concentrating, keeping everything out, going out. I'm not pulling anything to me. Remember when I do my curved corners, I never ever pull anything towards me. I'm always pushing it out. So I'm doing one bit at a time. I'm going to this valley to this peak right here, to this valley here, and I'm going to pull this out, and that will iron down. I know that because I'm pulling everything to here. It's not cupping or anything like that. I'm just targeting my presser foot to the valley now with my needle down. Now I'm going to bring my presser foot up, and again, the next valley I'm going to push under, and then you can see that the bias binding just rolls right over, but you need to help it a bit. You need to, with your fingers here, I'm needing to help it. Again, pulling it out as I stitch this down. Now, because of a design element, and also because I want to hide this stitching here, because it's not immaculate, I am going to be putting my rickrack. I've brought my quilt over to my ironing board, and I've started ironing my binding here. And as you can see, I'm concentrating the whole time on making sure I'm pulling out the mountains, my scallops here. I'll press the other side. As you can see, I really give my quilts a good press. And sometimes my finished quilts a good press. Sometimes I will spritz them with water or a little bit of starch, because I figure you've been messing about with this quilting and messing about, and as you know, cotton stretches, so we can just sort of nudge it back to where it wants to go. And yeah, so my ice cream cone border.